Tim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you, Angie.
Thanks.
You're kind of going in and out.
Freeze.
Yeah, Angie, you're frozen.
I said, if you have your phone, you might want to text her and let her know so she can at least call in.
Izetta, can you hear me?
Yes, Angie, I can. You just look a little frozen, so I'm worried that you might cut in and out.
Yeah, so I'm on by phone, so if that's okay, I'll just do it by phone.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to keep that on? No, she'll get rid of it.
Any idea why the top row of people, the pictures got smaller? Is that just happening on my iPad?
I think because more people joined.
Well, cut it in half right through Scott Randall's head and my nose.
I know that.
Never had that happen before. It must be something going on. Interesting. Oh, well.
I think it's just yours, Rod, but you're coming across like a Talking Dead music video. Guy bouncing around.
I'm trying to move the screen to get the size back. I have no idea what happened.
Is it a window that you can move?
Doesn't appear to be. And nope, not there. It was all the same size as everybody else's. Now the whole top row is about half the size. And maybe it's just on my end.
Yeah, mine looks normal.
Okay. I'll leave it alone then.
I'm looking down the hill and I see a unidentified object hovering over your house. I'm not sure if they're going to abduct you or Rod. There you go. Why don't you try rebooting and see if that solves that problem.
Yeah, well, I can't get on my laptop at all, ever. I tried the last 20 minutes. So I always end up back on the iPad. Anyway, all right, I'm going to leave.
Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you. Let's give
I can hear you.
Councilor Runyon a minute to get in here. Yeah. Oh, there he is. Rod, you with us? You're muted. Rod, I can see you fine, but you're muted.
That's a good thing too. It's like home.
Okay, we're all set to go. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Welcome to the June 14th, 2021 regular City Council meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order, and I'm asking the City Clerk to please call the roll.
Councillor Richardson,
Present.
Councillor Randall,
Present.
Councillor Runyon,
I'm here.
Councillor McLaughlin,
He raised his hand.
okay, thank you. Councillor Long Curtis,
Present.
thank you.
McLaughlin's here.
Mayor Mays.
I'm here too. Okay, I'd like to ask Councillor Scott Randall, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. There's two flags I see. One is in the council chambers, and the other one is more prominent, and it's right behind Councillor Rod Runyon. So Councillor Randall, please lead us. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all. Okay, item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda? Councilor Curtis.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
Councilor Runyon, were you going to?
I was going to say that.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Long Curtis and seconded by Councilor Runyon to approve the agenda. Is there any comments or questions or? Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
McLaughlin, aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 5 is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which was not later appear on the agenda. Up to 5 minutes per person will be allowed. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the city council for up to 5 minutes regarding any subject which is not on our agenda? Anybody? Last call. Okay, thank you very much. Item 6, city manager's report. Ms. Kruger.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. I do not have a report for you tonight.
Okay, city attorney report. Mr. Kara.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Since our last meeting, I've had several meetings with our Community Development Director, Alice Cannon, on some forthcoming LUDA amendments that we'll be bringing to you for consideration soon. Consistent with the recent House bills enrollment, speaking on the issue of shelter sites within city limits and the UGB. It's a work in progress, but we are progressing. I've also been lately, since our last meeting at least, in constant coordination with our police captain, Jamie Carrico, on the terms of implementing a policy throughout the city to manage and store personal property removed from established camping sites on city property. And we're making excellent strides collaborating with Elisa Fowler at Mid-Columbia Community Action Council. And so these are some of the more longer term projects that we've been working on. Seeing day-to-day results has been pretty gratifying for everybody involved. Thank you. That's my report for tonight.
I have a question. Is there going to be after you're done with all your research and your staff work, will there be a work session for the city council to discuss, or will it be part of a regular agenda?
We haven't thought as far ahead as planning for a special work session. We can, if that is what the council desires. If we think that it's not something that we can fit onto a regular meeting agenda, I think that the city would be happy to have a work session.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, city council reports. We'll start with Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. On 26th of May, the Dallas Historic Landmarks Commission had a meeting where they considered a request for seismic upgrades to Kurtz Gymnasium of the Dallas High School, including window upgrades, and also a request to install a 15 by 15 foot mural on the west face of 201 East 2nd Street, which is called the Shano structure. Both of those requests were approved on the normal conditions of approval. Also, last week I met with David Warden, the executive director of the Mid-Columbia Health Foundation, and that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Long Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since our last meeting, I have met with the city manager, Mayor Mays, County Commissioner Schwartz, and Councilor Richardson. I also attended an online seminar that was about looking past the urban-rural divide to identify potential commonalities and finding ways to elevate rural voices so that we can have respect for our unique interests and culture and values when we're talking about statewide future planning. And I attended the last League of Oregon Cities meeting online as well. And I spoke to a Riverbend high school class here about how city policies are made, and they're looking into coming up with their own policy and then presenting it in a few weeks. So that should be interesting. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Since last we spoke, I attended a Zoom or an online town hall put on by U.S. Senator Merkley, and another one, the Government Affairs meeting put on by the Chamber, at which our new police chief, Chief Worthy, spoke and introduced himself to a number of the community, and attended a 3-hour workshop on community resilience and hazards planning. Had a couple of meetings, one that was referenced by Councillor Long Curtis, also one with the Main Street, our new Main Street Executive Director, and a couple of constituents on various issues, and our City Manager, Julie Kruger. And that's my report for this evening.
Thank you. Councilor Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since our last meeting, my last meeting, early in May, I have visited 13 states on veterans issues, arriving back on June the 4th. On June 9th, I was on KODL with Gene Maxwell for the Mid-Columbia Veterans Memorial Committee and for the Columbia Gorge Veterans Museum, housed in City Hall, and now open Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 1 till 4. Also was invited as a former Port of the Dalles commissioner to a meeting in Dufur, Oregon at Dufur High School. And the big topic of the night was the retirement of Mike Courtney after 24 years with the Port of the Dalles Commission. And met with the mayor on June 10th. On the 11th, that was the 11th, met with the city manager on the 10th. Also on the 14th today, I attended the Mid-Columbia Veterans Memorial Committee meeting at the Civic, and the speaker was former mayor and author Steve Lawrence. That's my report.
Thank you. Councilor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Urban renewal, June 15th has been canceled. Airport update. I did make a call to Jim Wilcox. Nothing is really happening that I can report at this meeting, but I'll give you an update as we know more with the replacement of the management at the airport. I met with Mayor Mays last week just on general topics, and I was asked to get an update concerning the CAP request for the shelter funding expansion project. I did call and write to Daniel Bottom, and I'm still waiting to get back. He will get back to me as soon as possible. And for a couple of weeks, I was out of town on an adventure with my son, going across the United States, driving and down to Nashville, and it was a bucket list trip. So that's what I was doing the last 2 weeks. This is it for McLaughlin.
Thank you, Councilor. As far as my report goes, on May 25th, I did my usual monthly interview with Mark Bailey at KACI. On the same day, I gave a presentation to the Dalles Lands Club at Cirrhosis Park. On May 28th, I attended a community outreach team meeting, and on June 1st, Senator Merkley had a town hall. I attended a meeting preceding that town hall with other community leaders with the senator. On June 3rd, I attended a meeting with the Economic Development Commission for Wasco County. And on June 9th, I met with Sheriff Lane McGill regarding their plans to try to get a resolution center started in the Dalles. And finally, I want to announce that this coming weekend and the weekend after, the Children's Play Annie will be held at the Civic. And this is all kids cast, and tickets are very, very moderate. And I would encourage everyone to attend. It's this Friday and Saturday, June 18th and 19th, plus Friday the 25th. All the performances are at 7 o'clock. And then there's a Sunday matinee on the 27th at 2 o'clock, all at the Civic. I hope to see you there. And that concludes my report. Item 9 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the City Council to spend its time and energy on the important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of action items section. We only have one item on the consent agenda, and that's the approval of the May 24th regular City Council meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor Mays, I'll make the motion to approve the May 24th regular city meeting minutes.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there a second?
I will second that, Mr. Mayor.
I think I heard Richardson first, so it's been moved by Counselor McLaughlin, seconded by Counselor Richardson to approve the consent agenda. Is there any questions or comments? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda and the minutes, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, I see unanimous approval. Thank you all very much. Item 10 is public hearings. We have 3 tonight. The first one is a public hearing to receive testimony regarding the proposed uses of state shared revenues. This is a legislative hearing to receive testimony regarding proposed uses of state shared revenues. I will open the public hearing and ask for a staff report. Following the staff report, I will call for testimony for support of the issue, followed by testimony in opposition of the issue. At the conclusion of the testimony, the public hearing will be closed and the matter turned over to the City Council for deliberation and a decision. I hereby open the public hearing. And I would like to, I'm assuming our Finance Director, Ms. Wilson, will be giving a staff report.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. You have before you the agenda staff report for the public hearing on the proposed uses of the state revenue sharing funds for the fiscal year of 21-22 and consideration of the resolution number 21-014 declaring the state election to receive state revenues. The state revenue sharing law requires that the city to pass a resolution each year stating that they elect to receive the state revenue sharing money during the next fiscal year. The City of the Dalles has traditionally used the state revenue sharing funds to support activities in the general fund. The Budget Committee held a public hearing on May 3rd to consider possible uses of the funds, and they voted to recommend to the council that they continue to use those funds to support the general fund for fiscal year 21-22. The budget for fiscal year 21-22 as approved by the Budget Committee already includes the anticipated state revenue sharing funds as general fund revenue. Staff recommends that we move to adopt budget resolution number 21-014 declaring the city state election to receive the state revenue for fiscal year 21-22. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, before we get to questions, I would like to ask, is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify in support of this issue? Anybody? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify in opposition to this issue? Okay, hearing none. I'm now going to close the public hearing. And I'm now turning the matter over to the City Council for deliberation and decision. Does anybody on the City Council have any questions or comments regarding this issue? Councilor Long Curtis.
Yes, so my comment would be that I thought that the Budget Committee did a very good job of talking through all the issues this year. It was nice and in depth. I also was very happy to see that City Manager Kruger had requested an additional $40,000 for us to consider tonight for the feasibility study for the downtown underground utilities project, which is something I'm happy to see coming back. And so I would hope that my fellow counselors would vote to approve the budget with the addition of the $40,000 for the underground utilities study. Thank you.
Any other comments about the state shared revenues? Anything else? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 21-014, declaring the city's election to receive state revenues for fiscal year 2021-2022.
I'll second that. This is Councilor Runyon.
It's been moved by Councilor Randall and seconded by Councilor Runyon to approve the uses of state shared revenue. Is there any more discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Curtis?
I was just curious, this is a question. The proposed recommendation from staff also included some language about authorizing the city manager to carry out basically and do some signing of things. And so I'm wondering if we need to include that rather than just accepting the money in.
Ms. Kruger, did you have can you answer that?
Thank you, Mayor Mays. For the state revenue, if we just adopt the resolution, it will be signed and then we'll submit it to the state and it'll be certified to them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
McLaughlin, aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Our second public hearing is to receive testimony for the proposed fiscal year 21-22 budget. This is a legislative hearing to hear testimony regarding the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. I will open the public hearing and ask for a staff report. Following the staff report, I will call for testimony for support of the issue, followed by testimony in opposition of the issue. At the conclusion of the testimony, the public hearing will be closed and the matter turned over to the City Council for deliberation and a decision. I am now opening the public hearing. I would like to ask our Finance Director, Ms. Wilson, to give another staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. You have before you the agenda staff report for the public hearing to receive testimony regarding the approved 21-22 fiscal budget and resolution number 21-015, adopting the fiscal year 21-22 budget for the City of the Dalles. The City Budget Committee reviewed the proposed budget on May 3rd and the 4th. They approved the budget with no changes on May 4th. Oregon budget law allows the governing body prior to final adoption to make changes to the fund approved by the Budget Committee in the amounts of up to $5,000 or 10% of the operating portion of that fund, whichever is greater. If the changes are greater than the limit allows, another public hearing must be held with the required published notices prior to adoption. This evening, the city manager requests to add $40,000 to complete a feasibility study for the downtown underground utility project, reallocating the funds in the approved budget that were allocated to the reserve for the future fund expenditure and add $40,000 additional into the city council contractual services budget. This evening, we ask that you move to approve the budget approved by the Budget Committee, including the exception of the $40,000 additional funds to support the feasibility study. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify in favor of this issue? Anybody? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify in opposition to the issue? Okay, hearing and seeing nothing. I'm now closing the public hearing. And I'm opening it up the meeting to the city council for deliberation and a decision. Is there any questions for the finance director or the city manager? I take it that we make two separate motions on this. We can't combine both A and B into one motion. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, because the first motion, if you choose to accept the request for the additional funds, is already moved and approved, then you're adopting the budget with that included.
Right. Okay, is there anyone who'd like to make a motion to approve the budget, specifically the $40,000 in additional funds for the feasibility study for the underground utilities?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Okay, Councilor Long Curtis, did you want to second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Been moved by Councilor Richardson and seconded by Councilor Long Curtis to,
Could you please have them state the motion?
Dan, can you please state the motion?
Thank
You bet. I move to approve the budget approved by the Budget Committee, including $40,000 additional funds to support the feasibility study for the downtown underground utilities project.
And I'll
Okay,
second that.
And Councilor Long Curtis seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
McLaughlin, aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, our third public hearing is on now.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
we still have a motion pending to adopt the budget.
yes, the budget, yes. Thank you. We should pass a motion to pass the budget. Otherwise, we can't spend any money.
I'll be glad to do that, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Runyon, thank you.
I think I have it here. Resolution number 21-015, adopting the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget for the city of the Dalles, making appropriations, authorizing expenditures, levying taxes, and authorizing the city manager to take such action as necessary to carry out the adopted budget.
McLaughlin can second that.
It's been moved by Councilor Runyon and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to adopt the 2021-22 budget. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
McLaughlin, aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for catching that, Julie. Okay, on to the third public hearing. This is a legislative hearing to receive testimony regarding General Ordinance Number 21-1384, Housing Code Amendments. I will open the public hearing and ask for a staff report. Following the staff report, I will call for testimony for support of the issue, followed by testimony in opposition of the issue. At the conclusion of the testimony, the public hearing will be closed and the matter turned over to the City Council for deliberation and a decision. I'm now opening the public hearing. I'd like to turn it over. I trust it's Ms. Cannon who will be giving the staff report. Is that correct?
Mayor Mays and members of council, thank you. I have a few other folks who will be speaking tonight, and I want to introduce them and also thank them. This has been a very long project. We've been working on it since November of 2020, very steadily at Planning Commission's monthly meetings since that time. Also have gotten some public outreach in 2 open houses. So tonight's meeting may be the culmination or the kind of the final action you may take. I do want to tell you that the mayor had mentioned to me earlier, I guess it was late last week, that kind of warned me that this may be too much for one meeting. We did reserve some time on the next agenda, if you need it, to continue this hearing. And I will just say, I know Matt and maybe Dawn will be mentioning, we do have a grant for this project. It's funded by the state of Oregon to bring ourselves into compliance with some codes, of which we'll talk about in a minute. We do have a deadline to be in compliance by the end of June. So with that in mind, there is a little bit of a time pressure, but certainly we want to make sure you have enough time, and we could extend into next meeting if needed. So with that, I want to introduce our team. Dawn Hurt, Senior Planner, has been managing this project at the staff level. Really appreciate her good work. And Matt Hasty and Brandon Crawford from Angelo Planning Group in Portland are also going to be involved tonight and have been leading us through this project all along, and with the Planning Commission as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dawn for a short intro, and then we'll turn it over to Matt.
Perfect. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Councilors. As provided in the agenda staff report, this is some code amendments that we've been working on over the past few years. And a few years ago, we worked with the consultant to identify and prioritize some housing code amendments, specifically looking at improving housing supply here in the Dalles. Two previous phases of code amendments were done in 2019 and 2020. So the proposed amendments that we're reviewing tonight continue working through these recommendations that were provided by our consultant, but are primarily intended to implement the rules established by Oregon House Bill 2001 that was actually adopted in 2019. Other recommended code amendments will help reduce unnecessary barriers to provide housing, especially middle housing. The city's consultant, which is Angelo Planning Group, we have Matt Hasty and Brandon Crawford here tonight, divided the proposed amendments into 3 batches to make it a little bit easier for us to present not only to you, but also to make some suggested changes. The attached memo in your staff or in your packet included, which was dated April 29th, combined these 3 batches, as well as their revisions that were made by city staff and based on Planning Commission feedback. The group of amendments that we were presenting tonight were presented to the Planning Commission in 4 work sessions, as well as the comments from those sessions were reviewed and incorporated into the amendments that we're proposing. In addition, we had 2 virtual open houses. Matt Hasty will be providing some details regarding those open houses tonight. And the Planning Commission ended up holding a public hearing on May 20th to consider the recommended changes, and they unanimously voted to recommend these amendments to City Council. In terms of notification, this public hearing was prepared and mailed out for the Planning Commission to all residentially zoned properties in the Dalles. In the urban growth boundary. It was published in our local newspaper. Notices were sent to the DLCD as well as local news and posted on the city's website and social media. In terms of comments prior to the Planning Commission, we did receive 1 written comment, and we received 2 emails, 1 formal letter, and we had 7 citizens that actually spoke at our public hearing before the Planning Commission. Prior to tonight's City Council meeting, we received a letter from Kenny LaPointe, who is the Executive Director of Mid-Columbia Community Action Council. And would it be appropriate for me to read that, or did you all receive that letter already?
I think if we did receive it, we would have received it very late in the day. So
okay.
I would propose you read the letter.
I will do that. Okay, so letter was dated June 14th, 2021. Mayor Mays and the Dalles City Council members, I'm writing to, first of all, thank the City of the Dalles and the Planning Commission for its work to address needed housing amendments that I believe will address future housing access and affordability in our community. Secondly, I am writing to express our support for the proposed amendments. The mission of the Mid-Columbia Community Action Council is to build a better future for our community through partnerships and equity-centered programs that prevent and eliminate poverty and houselessness. As many of you may be aware of, housing access and availability is a core contributor to housing instability and houselessness. A lack of housing at all income levels creates the most severe and acute impacts for the most vulnerable and struggling community members. On a day-to-day basis, our agency works with members of our community to transition them out of houselessness and into permanent housing, or to transition them from one housing situation to another. This task has become more and more difficult as housing options become constrained and limited. I believe that these housing code amendments will help to increase housing supply in the Dalles and result in greater options and access for all our community members. In conclusion, I want to thank City Council and the Planning Commission for its leadership and commitment to the Dalles community and encourage your support for these amendments. Best regards, Kenny LaPointe, Executive Director. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presentation over to Matt Hasty of Angelo Planning Group, and he has prepared a PowerPoint presentation for us to all follow tonight.
Okay, I am going to start sharing my screen in just a moment here. All right, can everybody see that presentation? Okay, so again, my name is Matt Hasty. I'm with Angelo Planning Group, and thank you all for having me here. It's been a pleasure to work with your staff and members of the Planning Commission and other community members over the last several months, and happy to be here tonight. I'll walk through the proposed amendments. I'll give you a little bit more of a kind of background on House Bill 2001 and then some of the subsequent administrative rules. But I won't spend a ton of time on that. Then I'll walk through each of these three sort of types of code amendments that we'll be talking about this evening. Both, or not both, but amendments to implement kind of the minimum compliance aspects of the House bill and associated administrative rules, some additional potential middle housing code updates, and then some what we called cleanup amendments. And I'll talk more about all of those as I go through the presentation. I'll say a little bit about the results of the most recent online open house and survey that we conducted for this project. And then I think Don will review the staff and planning commission recommendation at the end there. And I'll be happy to take questions after the presentation is done. So with that, I will just get started. I guess if there's anything I am not clear about, let me know, but otherwise I'll just wait until the end on questions. So, excuse me. So just kind of a quick background. Don talked about this a little bit. House Bill 2001 was passed during the 2019 legislative session, and then the Oregon Department of Lands Conservation and Development subsequently went through a process to develop what's called a model code for middle housing. Our firm actually helped the state with that. And at the same time, their staff adopted a set of administrative rules that guide implementation by cities like the Dalles and counties around the state to comply or be consistent with House Bill 2001. You all are in the medium city category. So medium cities of a population of 10,000 to just below 25,000 are required to allow duplexes on any lot or parcel that currently allows single family detached homes. I'll say more about that as we talk about the code amendments. Larger need to do that, but they also need to allow other types of middle housing in areas where single family detached homes are allowed. You actually already do a lot of that, but you're not required to adopt those additional amendments as part of this project. But I will talk about some things that are being proposed along those lines as I go through this. So as Don noted, you all received a grant, or Alice noted this, I think you all received a grant from DLCD, and our firm was selected to help you out with this project. There's another firm on our team called Cascadia Partners, and they helped with graphics associated with the code amendments, and I'll point some of those out as we go through. And then as Alice mentioned, the legislative deadline for adopting the amendments that are needed to comply with House Bill 2001 is the end of this month, June 30th. Technically, our contract is good through tomorrow, although if you need some more assistance from us between now and June 30th, we're available to help you out with that. But that's kind of when our clock was supposed to run out, but we're still here for you. So won't talk too much about the schedule because Don already talked about this, and the fact that we had kind of monthly meetings with the Planning Commission for the last several months, as well as some other folks who kind of served as adjunct members of an advisory committee with the Planning Commission. And then Don mentioned that we did a couple of these online surveys, and I'll talk about the results of that last one. So I should have done a little "we are here" at the end of this because we're getting real close to the end of the process here. I will also mention briefly that you'll see a number of photos in this presentation. These are all pictures of housing in the Dalles, all examples of middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, row houses. So I didn't get them from Eugene or Portland, but I got them from Don and Josh and Alice. So they're all here in the Dalles. So you might recognize some from your streets or neighborhoods. So I'll just kind of start walking through the amendments. There are a couple of proposed amendments to comprehensive plan policies and implementation measures, essentially to be consistent with the code amendments that are also being proposed. So adding a policy in your comp plan that acknowledges essentially the basic requirement of House Bill 2001. We're proposing to remove some code provisions related to small lot single family housing that have really not been used in the community. And so updating the policies in the comp plan related to those. As well as one of the implementation measures related to duplexes, adding one related to that. So pretty modest or focused set of amendments to comp plan policies and measures here. So I'll start out talking about what we're calling these minimum compliance amendments. So these are things that the Dalles and other cities need to do to be consistent with the legislation and the administrative rules. And I will say that at the start of this process, we went through an audit of your code to check to see kind of what changes needed to be made, where you were already consistent. And for the most part, you really were already consistent with a lot of the requirements. So what we ended up with was a fairly focused set of amendments to ensure compliance. But in a lot of cases, you were already compliant. So for instance, you already allowed duplexes in these zones, but what needed to be done was, because duplexes need to be allowed on the same lots that single-family detached homes are on, you need to allow them on the same size lots. So there are proposed amendments to lot sizes in there's no need to amend the lot sizes in the RL zone, the low density zone, because you're already consistent there. But in the medium and high density zones, we're proposing to amend those lot sizes and actually bump those lot sizes up a little bit to come up with sort of a reasonably balanced set of lot size requirements in those zones for both single family detached homes and duplexes, and to make them similar in terms of the size per unit of other middle housing types in those areas. So that's the proposal there. Parking, cities per the administrative rules are not allowed to require more than 2 spaces in total for a duplex. So 1 space per unit. You can allow somebody to provide more parking than that, but you can't require more than that. And so the recommended code amendment will do that. It will change the minimum required number of spaces to 1 space per unit, or 2 in total for a duplex. Again, somebody can provide more if they want to do that, but you wouldn't require more than that. The other thing that the administrative rules and House Bill say is you essentially need to treat duplexes the same as you treat single family detached homes in terms of things like architectural design requirements, exceptions to things. So we took a pretty close look at your code, and there were a number of places where we're recommending some amendments to make sure that you're consistent with that. So for instance, there's a couple of things where single family detached homes are exempt from certain things. So, or have the ability, for instance, there's a temporary family hardship provision for single family homes. We need to provide that same thing for duplexes in your code. You currently can get a waiver of remonstrance and landscaping prior to occupancy exemptions for single family detached homes. So we're simply providing those same types of things for duplexes in the Dalles. And then we also looked at your code requirements to make sure that you have what are termed clear and objective standards. That's just a general requirement for all cities, that for all needed housing types. Your standards are clear and objective. And for the most part, they really are. We didn't find many issues there. But you had one standard, for instance, that talked about duplexes having the appearance of a single family house or a traditional front entry. And those are essentially subjective terms. So we're updating the code to remove those terms and clarify at least the entry standards. And I'll talk about those in a little bit. And then the House bill and the state administrative rules exempt duplexes from maximum density requirements, mainly because those requirements tend to not make sense once you allow a duplex on the same size lot as a single family detached home. And so we've essentially exempted the duplexes from those maximum density requirements in your residential zones. But the minimum lot size requirement still controls things. So they still have to comply with those. And then finally, duplexes need to be, you need to allow duplexes as a conversion from a single family detached home. So we drafted some code language to allow for that. One of the things that language says is that you can do that conversion, but it can't increase if that single family home is not in conformance. It's a non-conforming use. It's not in conformance with certain standards. It can't become more non-conforming through the conversion. So we included some language along those lines to address that potential issue. Those are all the changes that are sort of the required to be consistent with the state requirements. There's a couple of other things that are being proposed related to duplexes as well that I'll talk about with this slide. So the state administrative rules say that cities can allow duplexes as either two attached units or as attached or detached units on a single lot. And so we had a lot of discussion with your planning commission about this issue. We asked about this in the online survey that I mentioned. And the recommendation is to allow them as either attached or detached units. And I think the rationale here is really providing just greater flexibility for somebody, and particularly if somebody has an individual home, they want to create a duplex, it just provides more flexibility if they can be attached or detached. There's not a lot of, frankly, other differences in terms of impacts on housing. It can also result in, frankly, somewhat smaller units if the second unit is detached. The other change here is to allow for, currently your code requires that all units have an entry that faces the street. One configuration of a duplex could be that one of the units is behind the other unit. So if you took that kind of middle graphic and turned it 90 degrees, you'd have a unit behind it. And so we're proposing to allow for one of the entries to be on the side. So you'd still have at least one entry facing the street, but one could be on the side. So those are the other two kind of duplex related amendments here. So, Dawn mentioned that for quite a while, you've been looking at other amendments to your code related to middle housing types. You really adopted a lot of things that other cities of your size have not done. In the last few years, you've adopted standards to allow for what's called cottage cluster housing. You've already amended your code related to triplexes and quadplexes and townhomes. But there were a couple of other things that we recommended we look at as part of this process. One was to look at the minimum lot sizes associated with triplexes and quadplexes in your medium and high density zones. And we're recommending some changes to those so that those types of housing are essentially kind of on par with single family attached homes or row houses in those same zones. So the recommendation is that the minimum lot size is per dwelling unit for each of those housing types in each of those zones, with the minimum lot size being 1,500 square feet per unit in the RH zone, 2,000 per unit in the RM zone, and also reducing the minimum lot width and depth just to provide some more flexibility and to recognize kind of what the size of the configuration of a lot of the lots are in those zones. A lot of them are 50 feet wide, but you'd still need that number of square feet per unit, to build that type of housing. And then finally, part of what that can do is kind of create a somewhat bulkier building for a triplex or quadplex. And to address that and sort of thinking about issues of compatibility and livability, we're recommending reducing the maximum height of a triplex or a quadplex from 45 feet to 35 feet, still allowing that existing 45-foot height limit for essentially multifamily development or apartments, but bringing down the maximum height for triplexes and quadplexes, and that's illustrated in the graphic down there at the bottom of the screen. So those are the things that were, and then there's one more, which is parking, or actually two more. So parking, it wouldn't be a planning process without talk about parking and plenty of discussion about that. So we are recommending some changes to your parking requirements for triplexes, quadplexes, and townhomes, also in your code called single family attached housing. And the recommendation here is to reduce those off-street parking requirements to 1 space per unit. So 3 spaces in total for a triplex, 4 for a quadplex, 1 space per unit for a townhome. And again, this would be the maximum that you could require, but more could be provided if a developer or a builder or property owner chooses to provide more. And I think in a lot of cases, they will, particularly with townhomes. That's simply the configuration that's often provided as a driveway out front and a garage within the unit. But it would allow for them to provide less, which is going to help in terms of housing affordability based on the costs associated with development and the amount of space just needed for the parking on a given lot. And that was really kind of the rationale for these changes. We asked about this in the survey as well, so I'll talk about the results of that towards the end of this. And then the other change for these forms of housing is we're recommending applying the same kind of open space and landscaping requirements to triplexes and quadplexes that you apply to single family detached homes and duplexes, as opposed to what you currently apply to multifamily units, simply because those types of housing are more similar than they are to apartment complexes. And the 30% open space would be fairly high for a quadplex or a triplex. So that's what we're suggesting there. And then the third category of amendments is the last set that I'll talk about, are again what we call these cleanup code amendments. So these are things that your staff has identified kind of during the past as things that are problems in terms of administering your code, or that create barriers for property owners or developers as they're trying to build something on their property. So there's a number of these amendments. I'll walk through them fairly quickly. One, just to clarify the definitions of some things in your code. So adding definitions for gross density, net density, and porch. Those are all terms that are used in your code, but need some clarity in terms of the definition. Making sure that the density ranges in your code are consistent with the ones in your comprehensive plan. We're suggesting being kind of clear about what are the review types for different types of housing, and applying essentially a ministerial review process to single family detached homes, duplexes, and townhomes, and applying site plan review to multifamily. So being clear about those processes in your code. Where we talk about buildings in your code and we're really referring to a housing structure or a housing unit, using the term dwelling unit rather than building, so that we're clear about that and there's no confusion. You have kind of a menu of design features that can be applied to housing in your RL and your RH zones, but it's missing from your RM zone. And there's no reason it shouldn't apply to those units as well. It's essentially the same types of design features. So adding that to your RM zone, and then exempting detached duplexes from multiple buildings on one lot design standards, where those design standards are really intended for non-housing units, for accessory structures or buildings, and that don't make sense for actually a detached housing unit on a lot. And then I think this is nope, not quite the last one, but one of the last ones I'll talk about is reducing the required setback from an accessory dwelling unit to an alley. Currently, you've got a 5-foot requirement there. And so the issue that causes is there's a lot of garages that are right up to the alley right away. And if somebody wants to come in and build an ADU or convert the garage to an ADU, they can't do that, or they've got to like chop 5 feet off the garage or shift the garage 5 feet to be able to do that. So we're recommending reducing that to 0 feet, but also making sure that if the alley isn't a full 20 feet, that you've got 10 feet between the center line of the alley and the garage or the ADU. So that's one amendment. And then I think the last one here is looking at some changes in your CBC zone. And you've got 3 sub-districts within that zone. This is essentially the commercial zones within and around your downtown. And the recommendation here is in sub-districts 1 and 3, so that's the green and the blue unhatched areas on this map, to allow for pure residential uses in those zones. Right now, ground floor commercial or retail is required as part of any use in those zones or in those sub-districts. And that doesn't really sync up, frankly, with what's on the ground out there and what people would like to be able to do with their properties and the structures on them. And so this would give a little more flexibility to have more housing in the vicinity of your downtown, but in the sort of core area of your downtown sub-district 2, still proposing to require ground floor commercial reuse along with residential above, if somebody wants to do residential above. So that's kind of, I think, the last, yes, that's the last of the code amendments I'll talk about. I'll just say a few words about the online open house. We did 2 of these. And I don't have a slide for the first one we did. In the first one, we asked more about just sort of general attitudes about needed housing types and support for different types of housing in the DAOs. And what we found was really strong support for kind of a full range of housing types in the DAOs, and a lot of kind of concern about affordability of housing in the DAOs and just having enough housing of different types. In this more recent online survey that we did, we asked about some of the specific code amendment issues we're presenting to you tonight. We had 564 visits. So we don't know if those were all different people. It could, in a few times, somebody might have visited twice, but a fair number of visits for, I would say, a community this size. We had English and Spanish language versions of the open house and the survey, and we had about 45 visits to the Spanish site. Unfortunately, we didn't get responses to the Spanish version of the survey, and we got between 30 to 40, depending on the question, responses to the survey. So a lot of people looked at this information, and then a kind of smaller percentage of them responded to the surveys that we had. So I'll just quickly run through the responses to the surveys. We asked about allowing for detached duplexes as opposed to just attached. And 83% of the folks who responded said, yes, they thought that was a good idea. They agreed or strongly agreed with that recommendation. We asked people about the proposed lot sizes for duplexes and single family detached structures. 57% agreed or strongly agreed with the recommendation. When we asked about the triplex and quadplex lot size updates, 74% agreed or strongly agreed with that recommendation. And one of the things that we're not bringing to you, but that we talked about during this process was potentially updating the city's code in terms of what you allow for tiny or container homes. We ultimately decided that was kind of more than we could do as part of this process, but the Planning Commission was in favor of a future review of that. And so we asked people about it in the survey, and 68% said, yeah, they think that's a good thing for you guys to be looking into in more detail. And then finally, we asked people about the parking requirements. We asked them about reducing off-street parking requirements for triplexes and quadplexes. 62% said, yes, that's a good idea to reduce those off-street parking requirements for those forms of housing. A little bit split, or more split, let's say, on the townhomes. 48% agreed or strongly agreed with reducing the off-street parking requirements to 1 space per unit for townhomes. 44% disagreed, 8% neutral. So that was, I think, the only one where we didn't have 50% or more in the agree, strongly agree category. So that, I think, is all I have for you. And I don't know, do I bring up the staff recommendation now or later, Dawn?
We could probably wait and see if we obviously get public comment.
What I would do, Matt, I think you should,
Okay.
and then we can come back to it if the council wants to see the motion language again, but you should.
Bring it up now. Okay. All right, so that is the recommendation, which is to move to adopt General Ordinance number 21-1384, amending various sections in Title 10 and Title 11 of the Dallas Municipal Code, as well as amending goal number 10, housing goals, policies, and implementing measures of the Dallas Comprehensive Plan. I will stop sharing my screen just so we can see each other better. And but I'll be happy to bring the presentation back up later if you have questions about any particular slide or other information in there. And thank you.
Mayor, just to wrap up, I do want to acknowledge that we have our Planning Commission Chair, Mr. Bybee, Brent Bybee, is available to speak during the public comment period, but he does want to be able to speak to the Planning Commission recommendation when the time comes.
Yeah, we'll certainly give him every opportunity. We appreciate his leadership and his public service. I know the Planning Commission worked very hard on this as well. Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up for testimony. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify on behalf of the recommendations as presented? Anybody?
I'd be interested in making some comments. This is Mary Hanlon.
Okay, Ms. Hanlon, please give your address and proceed.
Okay, my address is 315 East 10th Street, the Dells. And I wrote a letter earlier in the process, and I'm not sure if the city council members were able to read that. I'll just kind of reiterate some of the points that I made in that letter. There are some facts that you all know all these things very well, but I think it's important to kind of point them out here in the context of this discussion. There was a severe housing crisis in the Dalles, even before the 30% increases in the last year. This lack of supply is drastically increasing the rental costs. I think the critical component to this is that thoughtfully planned growth in housing creates a healthy, thriving environment that reflects the values and sustains the citizens. And, alternatively, just ignoring that growth and ignoring the demand can block initiatives that support this thoughtful growth. And instead, you would want to lead this process so that it doesn't lead to a patchwork of substandard housing and some of the no construction and even commercial property. It's sort of a cycle that perpetuates itself, and it limits the investment in the town as well as the infrastructure. The community has an opportunity to really constructively embrace the desirable growth that's occurring in the Dells, and you can reinforce the town's defining characteristics as well as the characteristics of that you want to maintain and support a healthy community. By providing an adequate supply of quality housing, it's critical to the health of the small community and the stability of the community. Adequate housing is the cornerstone to this stability. The ability of housing, the availability of housing also allows the schools and employers to attract and retain families and employees. And good jobs in the town will increase wages and support the tax base. Young people can stay in their hometown with a good job and be close to family. All of these things create the foundation for social and economic well-being. In addition to the larger apartment projects, a well-conceived plan permitting an increase in housing inventory supports the health of the community. It also gives the homeowners an opportunity to add a small number of units to their property and increase their income. It's a mean to be addressing the housing crisis and it frees up housing units. By adding new ones, you're freeing up housing units for all income levels. And those are just a few of the benefits to supporting this kind of initiative. Supporting and encouraging the overall, the additional housing in the Dalles is good for everyone concerned. It increases the supply, and it positively affects the tax base. The city should create incentives rather than barriers to development of new units for residents of the Dalles. And the proposal that you have before you tonight begins to facilitate the much needed housing units in the Dalles. There's still the very serious challenge of addressing the gap between the construction costs and the rental rates. And there's also the additional challenge of financing new housing construction. But this is a very good start. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hanlon. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of these proposed amendments? I see Mr. Nate Stice, his hands raised. Please proceed, Mr. Stice. May I please get your address, please?
Mayor Mays, thanks for giving the opportunity to provide testimony. I'm Nate Stice. I live at 1010 G Street in the Dalles. And I'll add that I'm here in a personal capacity, although I do get into these issues professionally, and in fact have been working on different forms of technical advisory committees for the last 5 years around missing middle code in the Dalles and also in Hood River and other places. So I just wanted to be here to thank the city for continuing to lead on this subject. And in particular, I just thank the Planning Commission and staff for really moving this ball down the field in what I think is a really reasonable fashion. And I will say that I did attend many of the Planning Commission meetings as a technical advisory committee member. And there are a few pieces of this proposal that I don't know if they're quite in the right direction. In particular, the increasing the lot size limits housing, and there's lots of work out there to show that limits opportunities for housing. But overall, I think this is a great compromise position to move the conversation forward, and your staff and your planning commissioners should be proud of the work. You should be proud of their work on this subject. And I'll just, Mary, I think, did a very good job of talking about why this is needed, and I'm just going to put some numbers to that for you. We do have an extreme housing crisis. I send many of you an update on housing that I'm pulling quarterly now, and there was a 1-bedroom rental in the Dalles that listed for $1,680 this last in April. 2 bedrooms go, when I pulled the numbers in April, we're going from a range of $1,000 to $1,600. 3 bedrooms, there was like a single one listed at $1,900, and there was only 1 4-bedroom for $1,900 a month as well. And so there's not a supply. They're definitely not affordable. And I hear most about this from employers in town who are having trouble finding housing for their workforce. And I think this is a good first step in helping to address some of that, and providing developers, and many small developers like ones on this call, like Jonathan Blum, who are out there actively creating supply opportunities to continue to do that good work to chip away at the edges of this crisis. I will say that this is just a first step, and that there's a lot of work that needs to be done at, frankly, every level of government to address the housing crisis. And I look forward to continuing to work with you all and forward this conversation to think about other ways that we can increase the stock of quality and affordable housing in the community, because I think we need to realize that the character of our community is under threat by the lack of affordable housing. We have a working class town right now that is slowly slipping away from us because single family homes increased 30% year over year. And it is continuing to just head in that direction. And so if we want to live in a town where a doctor can live next to a barista, can live next to someone who works in the outdoor industry, and that is also a teacher and a nurse, and also, you know, the guy who serves me beer at Freebridge, then we need to think about how we buckle down and make that happen, and keep that character of our community that makes us so strong, which is that we live next to people in different walks of life here. So I just, again, want to end by thanking the Planning Commission and staff for their hard work, and encourage you all to continue to think about how we move forward on this conversation as a community.
Thank you, Mr. Stice. I see a hand raised by Debbie Ferrer. Ms. Ferrer, your name and address, please.
Hi, Debbie Ferrer. Address is 900 West 18th Street in the Dalles. And I would just like to say that I appreciate the comments very much of the previous two speakers. Great insight into the needs of this community. Also, I really appreciate the two surveys that the city put out there, because I think those surveys and the explanations that went with them really helped me to understand much more than I could ever understand by just sitting in on a city council meeting. So that survey, or those two surveys anyway, were really helpful in kind of illustrating the situation to the public. And then the last thing I'd like to say is just how strongly I feel about how good this will be for our community to revitalize our community, you know, in the interior part of our community, rather than relying on, you know, what is an easier option a lot of times, or a cheaper option for builders, and that's to build out and kind of sprawl outwards. But if we really want to, you know, revitalize our community, we need to do it on the inside rather than just moving out to where it's easier to develop. And of course, you know, we also have limitations with our urban growth boundaries. So I really think this is the way that we have to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nick Portella.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Mays and City Council. My name is Nick Portella. I live at 323 West 8th. And other, you know, more than echo the people that have spoken before me, which I do, I echo all of their sentiments. I would also like to include more of the community voice. I am part of the leadership at the Next Door, a community-based organization here in the Dalles and in Hood River. And we are part of the state's Regional Health Equity Coalition. And this is something that community members are constantly coming to our coalition meetings, discussing the need for affordable housing and the ties that it has to overall health and wellness within the community, for their children, for themselves, and for our future. And so just really thinking about the ways in which we obviously, based on their recommendations, are already going on the right direction. Had so many things that were wonderfully included in our statutes as they are, and then to just be able to expand upon that and be even more welcoming. I think that it's only going to improve things here in the Dalles and allow for the everyman to really invest and reinvest in this community, rather than just the select few who have the means and funding to do so. And, you know, it's just, I do stand behind this as a member of the community, and also as a member of our regional health equity coalitions here in the community. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Bybee, your name and address, please. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor Mays, and thank you, City Council. Brent Bybee, 1311 Laughlin Street here in the Dalles. I just want to start by saying excellent work by staff. You know, the city planning department does not get enough credit for the work that they do. As well as Matt, thank you very much for all your work as well. It was a pleasure going through this process with staff and with Matt. I want to say that a lot of these amendments, you know, are required by the state. A lot, you know, some of them are not, but there was a lot, as you know, as you saw by the timeline presented to you, there was a lot of work that went in behind this. A lot of it was thought out. The commission really chose what they thought was best for the whole community and not necessarily a select few. It is my opinion with a lot of these amendments and changes that it is going to provide a lot more options for folks. This is intended to fix a housing issue, but it's my personal opinion, as well as a few other commissioners will share the same sentiment, that these changes will not occur drastically overnight. You will see this as a slow process. Folks are most likely not going to hop on this right away. Some of the amendments, we discussed parking. That I can guarantee you was a hot issue, and the commission was definitely split down the middle, much like the survey that was conducted for the public. We really, as I stated though, it thought that more options would be better, and those are minimums that are not required. They're choices for folks to go down to, and for those that still wish to see be a community that has more parking or more single family housing, they have that choice. So I want to thank you for your time to listen to me today. And if you have any questions later on about the commission and their decision as well, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Bybee. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Well, I do see one. Jonathan Bloom. Please unmute yourself and give us your name and address, please, and go ahead and speak your piece.
Yep. My name is Jonathan Blum. I reside at 1605 East 19th Street in the Dalles. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council and Planning staff and Commission who are here this evening. I really appreciate the time that everybody has put into these very thoughtful and well planned out amendments for to the city to the planning code moving forward. I'm a builder and developer and rental owner in the Dalles, and I will say that being a developer in the Dalles over the last decade has been quite a roller coaster. As Mr. Stice mentioned, I was personally involved in a LUBA case over planning some very sensible development in our town. And since that time, I've been very discouraged about continuing to build more sensible housing in the Dalles because of the kind of liability you open yourself up to when dealing with a set of with a planning code that in times is a little ambiguous and doesn't provide clear objective standards that you can meet in a way that oppositional neighbors don't feel like they can walk all over you. And so in some ways, I feel like my case and the development that I was doing was a bit ahead of its time, but I'm grateful to both the City Council, past and present, for continuing to support sensible housing in our town. It's really what's keeping people in houses and keeping people like me moving forward. I really am inspired to see what's going on here, though, and I think that this proposal is both reasonable and sensible. Opponents to this might say how making these changes will open the floodgates to irresponsible developers, but I really think that this set of code amendment changes removes barriers to development, and that will continue to allow people like me to put more housing in our town, which is something that we really, really need. And as some of the other speakers have said, if you've taken a look at how much it costs to rent a one-bedroom place in the Dalles these days, it's no longer affordable for the average person. And so I think it's really great that we're making progressive moves towards creating more housing, which will create a greater supply and lower the cost of housing in our community. I especially think for what they call the missing middle housing and for lower income brackets of housing, we need more opportunity for those folks. And I strongly support these amendments because I think that this will help with that. I also appreciate the thoughtfulness into this that will encourage people to come into compliance with potential illegal duplexes or illegal ADUs that they're currently renting out. I see in the amendment changes that are being proposed that there is room for those folks to come to the city and say, I've been running this illegal duplex and I would like to be compliant. I think that will create a higher quality of housing in the Dalles, and it will encourage people who have sort of been doing it under the radar to come out, because they can say, wow, like now this is an accepted thing. Like it's okay for me to rent out part of my house to somebody else, because that helps support my housing as well. So I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into helping people come into compliance as well. And yeah, like I said, I think that the Planning Commission does not get nearly enough credit for what they do. It is a tremendous job and service to our community. So thank you to all the members of the Planning Commission, the staff of the Planning Department, especially Dawn Hurt, who has been a champion of these issues for many, many years. I really appreciate you and all the work you've done. And thank you to the City Council for moving forward on these important issues now and into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Blum. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in support of these amendments? Anybody? Last call. Okay, I'd like to take this opportunity to allow people who are in opposition to the proposed amendments to speak right now. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the proposed amendments? Anybody? Mr. Stice and Mr. Blum, you can unraise your hands. That would be great. I don't want to get confused. Thank you. Anybody want to speak in opposition to the proposed amendments? Last call. Okay. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm now opening up for City Council discussion and questions. Councilor Runyon.
Just a couple of clarifications, I guess, for our presenter of the slides. Would be slide 3 first, and then slide 5, I believe it is. Slide 3, the title on it is Duplex Amendments, Minimum Compliance. And in the packet, it's page 75 of 219. And Matt's coming back, yeah. Yeah, okay, so duplex minimum compliance. I'm looking down here at about the middle, high density residential RH, 2,500 square feet is the minimum. Am I correct on that? And then I go to slide 5, and this is where I just want to make sure we're on the same path. And that one is other middle housing updates, triplex, quadplex, page 76 of 219. And there it says minimum lot size, 1,500 square feet per dwelling unit. So I would assume that means 3,000 for the duplex, at least that much land of lot size available. So if it's on the same lot or area as a single family home, you would have to have 2,500 plus 3,000, 5,500 square feet. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, let me try to sort of clarify the question. So in the high density residential zone, what's being proposed is for either a single family detached home or a duplex, the minimum lot size would be 2,500 square feet. So for the 1 or the 2 units, 2,500 square feet. In the medium density zone, it would be 4,000 square feet for a single family detached home or a duplex. The other slide is showing the proposed standards for triplexes and quadplexes, and also for townhomes or single family attached homes. So that's going to be 3 or more. So these don't apply to duplexes or single family detached homes. These would apply to those other types of housing, triplexes, quadplexes, row houses. So in this case, the minimum lot size would be 1,500 square feet per unit. So a triplex, that would be 4,500 square feet in the high density zone, or 6,000 square feet in the medium density zone.
And to clarify, it has nothing to do with having a single family home. That's a whole nother issue.
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure that was clear to everyone, because when I first looked at it, it was a little bit confusing. My other question, if I may continue, Mr. Mayor. I'll assume that's a yes.
Yeah,
I can't hear. Okay. All right. And this may be for Ms. Cannon or Ms. Hurd. Going back to page 69 of 219, second paragraph, Ms. Cannon noted the city is mandated to allow duplexes on lots that allow single family homes, and the city is increasing lot sizes for single family dwellings to better accommodate duplexes. And part of what I'm interested in, we're allowing one parking place per unit on a duplex or triplex or quad situation. How does that affect single family homes? Are we allowing single family homes to be built with just parking for, a driveway for one vehicle? Is there any effect at all on those ordinances?
Councilor Runyon, the same parking requirement would apply to single family homes as well. And what's important to note is this is just a minimum. A lot of people will want to put in more parking. So this is minimum, and they can always choose to put in more as their the needs of their renters or their own needs need to be met.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just a couple of things I thought other people might have questions about. Thank you so much.
Any other city council members have questions or comments? Matt, could you take the slide thing down so I can see everybody? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Mayor Mays, I just have a quick, I've been reading the invited public comments, and Ms. Anslinger noted that she has a concern about no proposal to regulate sale prices of duplex, triplexes, and quadplexes. What actions can a city take to regulate the cost or the sale price of new construction?
Councilor Mayor Mays and Councilor McLaughlin, this set of amendments doesn't get into that at all, and you know that already. But what I will say is, I think some of the things that we're looking to explore in downtown through using urban renewal as a tool are incentives. What are some financial incentives we can provide to help fund the development of housing in the downtown? So some incentives. As far as there are some other cities out there, Portland is one, that have a program called inclusionary zoning, where if there is a multifamily development, a certain percentage have to be set aside for permanently affordable or units affordable to a certain percentage of the area median income for 30 years or something like that. So there are some programs like that, usually where there's either state subsidy involved. Oregon Housing and Community Services does help fund some of these things. There's more and more money out there right now as a result of kind of this housing crisis we're in. And there are some cities that are in the business, have gotten themselves in the business of requiring developers to build affordable, permanently affordable units. I don't know too many cities this size that have done that, however. They've tended to go toward there's sort of a carrot and a stick approach, tended to go more toward the carrot or the incentive-based approach.
Yes, I did know the answer to that question. However, it appears that citizens believe that city government can set standards overwhelmingly to disregard state standards and legislation. And I don't see that our city has a choice in implementing those state standards.
That's correct. We don't. There are some, as has been noted in this packet, the amendments have been broken out into minimum compliance, and then those other amendments that are proposed by staff and the consulting team. If we don't, I think the question was asked early on in our project at Planning Commission, what will happen if we don't comply? What will happen is someone will apply for the decision to be appealed to LUBA and will lose. So it's one of those where we'll have to apply, and we are required to, if we don't have the code amendments in place, to apply what's called as our state model code. So we have to apply those standards if we don't have any in place. I think it's by July 1st of this year. So yeah, we have to comply.
And that was a good response to my question. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Richardson.
Oh, I think Councilor Runming beat me to the hand up, Mr. Mayor. I can wait.
He's waving. I think he's conceding to you, Councilor Richardson. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to congratulate the staff and the Planning Commission on obviously a lot of work. Not only they seem to go above and beyond and not just take the code amendments that were mandated, but to be thoughtful about how to apply them and add little sort of housekeeping fixes and such for our town. So I appreciate that. I'm mindful of some of the other comments and ongoing concerns about affordability and also character of our town. And that number, I think that maybe Mr. Stice pointed out, the 30% or the roughly 30% jump in house prices over the past year. And I would say this huge new demand suggests there's these larger market forces at play and things that are outside our control, but maybe not outside our ability to think about and address. So I guess I'm just thinking out loud, Mr. Mayor, wondering how we could continue this conversation at city, whether it would be a request to city staff or a subcommittee or some other or vehicle where we could think about how to address and how to get at some of these larger issues. I'm thinking this may just be the start of extra demand for housing in our town that may be coming down the pike, maybe because sort of bigger cultural changes brought on by the pandemic, or perhaps climate impacts in California that drive people north. You know, we have a great community in a lot of ways, and I think people are just starting to see how desirable it is. So that's my question to you, Mr. Mayor. I support the code amendments, and how could we maybe think about continuing or facilitating this conversation with city staff or ourselves?
I was going to answer that, but I would prefer that Ms. Cannon answer first. And then maybe I can chime in. Go ahead.
Thank you. I did want to say, and I talked to Julie about this last week or the week prior, there has been some legislation. The legislature's been quite busy in the area of housing. And I think we owe, as a staff, we owe an update to the council. So I'm planning to come back for a discussion item on I think it's the first meeting in July 13th, I believe is the date. But I'll plan to come back and talk about that state legislation and give a summary of that. And that might be a good time, if you choose, to talk about any other things that are of interest. I know the Planning Commission and members of the public were interested in having us look at tiny homes and container homes and so forth. And there are pros and cons to all those things, but it's a worthy discussion that our members of our community were interested in having us at least talk about and begin to think about rules that might apply to the Dalles.
I would also suggest that we let some time go by before we really see what the effect of all these changes on the local and state level are. I would suppose that we're going to be seeing a lot of changes throughout the state because of House Bill 2001 and because of the local efforts we've made. And certainly July would be too soon for that, but perhaps in the ensuing months, Maybe even a year would go by before we could look into that. Did you have anything else, Councilor Richardson?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's it.
Okay, anybody else? Councilor Runyon?
Just to follow up, since Tim brought up a letter from a constituent, I just want to ask the question, and Ms. Cannon, we won't get into any laundry or anything here at this point, but regarding the Harmon's question about their home and an adjoining piece of property, were you able to speak with them and answer their questions, you or Don? Has that happened yet?
Councilor Runyon, can you remind me about that? Maybe, oh, Don's going to speak to that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So we did, there was an email that was sent. So I'm not sure, I had not personally talked to Jack Harmon or Una May. So I will do that, Rod, if that would be, Councilor Runyon, if you'd like that. I could definitely reach out to them to make sure they understood.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, you bet.
Anybody?
Mayor Mays, I just have one quick question, one more. And that is on Mary Hanlon. She talked about the cost of construction is so high, she's been able to build housing in the Dalles. Are those costs something that is within the city's control, or is it out of our control?
I'm going to toss a first
Go ahead,
answer.
Matt.
You all don't control the cost of housing, but your zoning has an impact on the cost of housing, particularly in terms of the cost of land and the ability to build housing in specific locations. And I think the kind of underlying or overarching intentions of the legislation and really a number of the changes to the code are to allow for types of housing that on average can be built at a lower cost. And by reducing partly the size of the units and also the amount of land needed to construct the housing. So you all don't control the cost of land, you don't control the cost of building materials, but your zoning ordinances do have an impact on the cost of development and the cost of building a particular kind of housing unit. So that would be my response anyway, and Alice or Don may have more to ask, but I would toss that out there.
No, that was an excellent.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but I could just add, the construction costs are so high right now. It's almost impossible to build. As you guys know, we've been trying to put something downtown for several years now, and we can't fill the gap. So if this is a measure to be able to get, if there are people out there who can address the construction costs. And while Nate is able to point in the direction of these high costs, the appraisals would support a much lower market than that. Rental rate, and so you've got an even bigger gap because the banks won't finance anything over what the appraisal comes in. So it's just a really challenging market to try to put housing in, which is why we're supportive of this amendment, so that you can kind of also, I would just add to Mr. Hastie's comments that it's not only the that the permitting, the zoning can change the cost. I mean the value of the land, but it's also the process is extremely difficult. So then if the city is ambivalent or objects to it, and it becomes an even more difficult process, it's just not worth doing it, even if you could make it pencil, which is very challenging to do in the Dells.
For the record, that was Mary Hanlon who just spoke. Thank you, Mary. Anybody else? Okay, I had a couple of questions. When Councilor Runyon was talking, I think I have a different page. I'm looking at slide 10 on page 76. It's other middle housing updates, triplex, quadplex. Do you see that one, Matt? Okay, this is slide number 10. It's on page 76.
So, Mayor, I don't know that that he has the packet open in front of him. I don't know that for sure, but I will say that this presentation he has for you is an updated version. The one you have in the Planning Commission minutes that are attached to your packet you have an updated, the one that where the screen is being shared is an updated version just for you. So
okay, the slide I'm referring to is the one right before the one you have up. There we go. Building height, 35 feet. I take it we're lowering the maximum building height for triplexes and quadplexes. What is the rationale?
The rationale is that we've reduced the minimum lot size for those housing types, and we've also reduced the minimum lot width. We've also are recommending reducing the number of parking spaces. What that can result in is more of the lot being consumed by the building, which can lead to a somewhat more massive or large building in comparison to the homes around it. And so to address that, kind of try to moderate that a little bit and make, increase compatibility, we're recommending reducing the building height that would still allow at least 2 stories, if not 3. I'm going to say 2.5 to 3 stories. But it makes the height of the triplex or quadplex not so much higher than the typical 2-story house that might be next to it. It retains that existing 45-foot height for multifamily, again, kind of typically apartments at 5 or more units, but reduces it for triplexes and quadplexes. And that was the rationale.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
On the bottom of on page 1 of the staff report, the very last sentence, page 1 of the staff report. For the purposes of the new state requirements, middle housing is defined as duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, et cetera, et cetera. House Bill 2001 requires medium cities, which is what we are, to allow middle housing in all residential areas. Is that meant to include single family? Because I understand 2001 requires duplexes.
Yeah, that could be I don't know if that's a typo. It doesn't require medium cities to allow middle housing, other forms of middle housing in all residential areas. It just requires you to allow duplexes on any lot where a single family detached home is allowed. And not only to allow them, but to essentially treat them the same way you'd treat a single family detached home in terms of the size of the lot, design standards, et cetera. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Director Cannon, a couple of months ago, I think I told you about I was in Mosier and I came across a gentleman who was building 4 or 5 tiny homes in Mosier. Mm-hmm. And I believe these were 700 square feet. Mm-hmm. And did he, I invited him to contact you, and did he ever do that?
No, Mayor, he did not reach out to me that I'm aware of. However, our staff went and have looked at that development, and I think even took some pictures. So we were very interested in hearing about it. And certainly if we get to a place where we're talking more about refining our cottage cluster standards, which we already allow those types of developments under certain circumstances in our city. But in the context of tiny homes, if it's something that fits in that category, then we might need to refine our code a little bit. But I would absolutely welcome talking to him some more.
Yes, just for if anyone is interested, when I talked to him, I was interested in what he would be selling those homes for and what type of families he might be attracting. And he informed me that those were summer vacation homes and weren't meant for permanent residence. So, okay, well, that's all the questions I had. Thank you, Director Cannon. Anybody else? Last call for questions and comments. Okay, I would suppose that we have 3 alternatives. One, as the staff report suggests, passing a motion to adopt the ordinance. Second is to entertain a motion to decline to adopt the ordinance. And 3 is what had been suggested at the beginning of this meeting, and that is that if it's too much for people to absorb or to the council, is to put it off till next month. I didn't hear any issues that required reporting back or reconsideration. So does any member of the council have any comments on where would they like to proceed from here?
Yeah, I have a quick question or a quick comment. It appears to me that this ordinance is a good faith effort to find middle ground to promote improved building and housing in our city. So I support moving on.
Thank you, Councilor McLaughlin. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, if the council does want to make a motion to adopt the ordinance, I don't know if we provided you with the little script for that where we have to ask, does anyone want it read in full? And if not, then the city clerk reads it by title only.
Would anyone here on the city council like to have the ordinance read in its entirety by the city clerk?
No.
I see several heads shaking. No.
McLaughlin says no.
Okay. With that in mind, would anybody like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance?
I will.
It would have to
Mayor
be read,
Mays.
the title would have to be read first.
Okay.
Thank you.
City clerk, could you please read the title?
Yes. General Ordinance Number 21-1384, an ordinance amending sections 10.2.030, 10.3.030.040E, 3080.020B, 10.5010.101, 10.5.010.060, 10.5.010.070, 10.5.010.080, 10.5.020.010, 10.5.020.020, 10.5.020.060, 10.5.020.070, 10.5.020.080, 10.5.020.090, 10.5.030.020, 10.5.030.060, 10.5.030.070, 10.5.030.090, 10.5.030.080, 10.5.040.060, 10.5.040.070, 10.5.040.090, 10.5.050.030A, 10.6.010.030, 10.6.010.070, 10.6.030.050, 10.6.040.010, 10.6.040.020, 10.6.120.040, 10.6.130.010, 10.7.060.010, and 10.10.030 of the Dalles Municipal Code, Title 10, Land Use Development Section 11.12.050A of the Dalles Municipal Code, Title 11, Planning, and Goal Number 10, Housing Goals, Policies, and Implementing Measures of the Dalles Comprehensive Plan.
Thank you, Ms. Gross.
Sorry I didn't get all that. May we have that read again, Mayor?
You can read it in your motion.
I was going to ask if she got every point and decimal exactly correct. I think she did.
It did.
That must have been the most challenging title you've ever read. Okay, with that,
I'll make a motion. I'll move to adopt general ordinance number 21-1384 by title only, amending various sections in Title 10 and Title 11 of the Dallas Municipal Code, as well as amending goal number 10, housing goals, policies, and implementing measures of the Dallas Comprehensive Plan.
This is Randall. I second the motion.
it's been moved by Councilor Long Curtis and seconded by Councilor Randall to adopt General Ordinance 21-1384. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of adopting the ordinance, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
McLaughlin, aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you to the staff and to the Plan Commission as well for a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Item 11 on the agenda, 11A, is an authorization to award contract for a reconstruction project on West 15th. Mr. Dave Anderson.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. The issue is to consider award of a contract for the reconstruction of 3 blocks of West 15th Street between Liberty Street and Garrison. This is a section of roadway which is deteriorated beyond its ability to be repaired by a lesser means. And therefore, this project will include the construction of a new base, a repaving of the street, and installation of new ADA compliant ramps on all these sidewalks at the intersections within the project area. The project was designed by city engineers. We advertised the project for bid. We did only receive 1 bid on the project, and that was from Granite Construction in an amount of $629,629. That bid is $40,227 more than we had budgeted for the project. And the reason for that increase is because between the time the budget for the project was developed and the engineering was completed, there was identified that there was a section of curb and gutter that was going to have to be rebuilt to improve the drainage through that project area. The approved budget, current year budget, includes $589,402 in the Public Works Reserve Fund for the project. As I mentioned, the $40,227 of bid is higher than we budgeted. However, within that same budget code, we have $400,000 that we were building the fund for a project next year for the Scenic Drive Stabilization Project. Staff recommends that the $40,227 of those funds be used to complete the funding for this West 15th Street reconstruction project. And then in the budget that was just adopted earlier tonight for next year, fiscal year, we do have $140,000 that's not already allocated to another project where we can backfill the funding for the Scenic Drive Stabilization Project next year. With that, it's staff's recommendation that the City Council move to authorize the award of contract number 2021-007 for the West 15th Street Reconstruction Project to Granite Construction in an amount not to exceed $629,629.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any comments or questions for Mr. Anderson?
I have one, Mr. Mayor. This is Councilor Richardson.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. How many similar spots in town of several blocks length, say, are on your list of sites that are quite so severely degraded? How many more of these are you aware of?
Well, I would say that this is probably the worst section that we still have. We're really focusing on the areas that we can improve with chip seals, and we just tried this experimental treatment, or experimental for us, of a scrub seal project last week. We've got some smaller sections that I think are also bad. This one's just probably our worst remaining street that is more than 1 block in length that is in this bad a shape.
Yeah, I came around the corner maybe last year and on my bicycle and forgotten sort of how long of a beat up section that is. And it was a little bit of an education. Thank you.
I would suggest that West 13th around Mount Hood, I believe, around that 2 or 3 block areas, maybe a close second to this one. Any other comments or any more discussion? Anybody like to make a motion?
Councilor Runyon is willing to do it if no one else is. I'd make a motion to authorize the award of contract number 2021-007 for the West 15th Street reconstruction project to Granite Construction in an amount not to exceed $629,629.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Council Runyon and seconded by Council Richardson to authorize the contract for the West 15th Street reconstruction project. Is there any more discussion?
I have one. Since other people listed theirs, 8th Street between Union and Trevitt, which we've talked about before. Okay. Other than that, nothing.
Any other comments or questions for the staff? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
McLaughlin, aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Item 12A, 12A, an intergovernmental agreement with ODOT for First Street and Riverfront Connection Project right-of-way services. Ms. Cannon.
Mayor, members of council, thank you. We are seeking the council approval of an IGA, intergovernmental agreement, for right-of-way services between ODOT and the City of the Dalles to support the First Street Riverfront Connection Project. And we are nearing completion. I said this last meeting where we had asked you for a few more dollars to fund some additional work to complete the design for the project. Some of that is in support of this right-of-way phase for the project. So we're nearing, like as I said, nearing completion of the design, which leads us to one more phase till we can get to construction. And that is we need to make sure we have all the land and the rights to build in the area that we said that the plans, so it matches up with our plans. So with that, there are very few local governments in Oregon, if any, that have the required certifications, required federal certifications to provide right-of-way services to do this work. And so ODOT, we have to, there really isn't another choice for us. We have to enter into an IGA with ODOT to complete this work for us, to meet all of the requirements that are and the strings that are attached to the federal grant that we've received. And so with that, this is the proposed agreement that has been forwarded on from ODOT. And I outlined 3 different phases that are part of the typical process for right-of-way acquisition. We have in this project not only land, a little bit of land that we need to acquire, but also I think I had mentioned that our street, First Street, is on both city property, city right-of-way, but also Union Pacific right-of-way. So we'll have to come to terms with an easement agreement to continue that work. So what's the budget implication of this project? We anticipate at this time that the services will not exceed $200,000. That was included in the proposed budget, so we don't need any budget adjustments for that. And that was already approved in the urban renewal budget on May 18th. So staff's recommendation to the council is to move to authorize the city manager to execute the intergovernmental agreement for right-of-way services between the City of the Dalles and Oregon Department of Transportation, number 34666, for the First Street Riverfront Connection Project.
Any questions or discussion? I have a quick question. Is the reason ODOT is involved with this because of the railroad? Because of the railroad involvement?
The main reason that ODOT is involved is because we have federal money. We did receive a federal grant for this project. And as a result of that, we have to follow all the federal guidelines. and that there are a few more hoops when you have ODOT, and the federal requirements are enforced in the state of Oregon by ODOT. So that's why they're involved.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, this is Randall. I move to authorize the city manager to execute the intergovernmental agreement for right-of-way services between the City of the Dalles and Oregon Department of Transportation, number 34666, for the First Street Riverfront Connection Project.
I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved by Randall, seconded by, there was a tie between Runyon and Long Curtis. I'll let the city clerk decide.
She can have it.
Councilor Long Curtis seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 12B is renewal of the city's workers' compensation insurance package. Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of council. You've got my staff report as well as a letter from Stratton Insurance, our agent of record for our workers' comp insurance, as well as two proposals. One from SAFE, which would be a straight renewal of our SAFE workers' comp insurance. And the second proposal is to join in with a City County Insurance Services SAFE workers' comp group. This group was formed after some discussion last year between the two parties and some follow-up committee meetings and board of trustees meetings with CIS and some of the members. And the result of that is this group, if we joined that group, that's the combination of CIS and SAFE, we would experience some significant savings. My concern, which we'll get to my recommendation, but my concern with that is City County Insurance Services on our other insurance lines tends to take the initial easy road and maybe doesn't have the long-term vision for what future rates or what the impact on future rates or costs could be. And I'm hesitant to jump into that group at this point, largely for that reason. We could experience some significant savings this year, only to find our premiums next year have wiped out our good efforts over the last several years when it comes to our workers' comp experience rating and premiums paid. And so for that reason, I'm recommending staying with SAFE. We'll continue to evaluate this group and the services received by cities that have joined it. I know that cities that are currently with CIS for their workers' comp are probably going to end up much happier with this group, just because I know the services we get from SAFE, particularly on the investigative and return to work side, are really exceptional, and we get good consultation from them with our safety officers. So with that, I think Brianna Wimmer from Stratton is here if you have any questions for her, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have of me.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. And then we appreciate Ms. Wimber being here as well. Any, does the council have any questions or comments? Or...
I have a question.
Councilor Long Curtis.
Yes, so I understand that for this year, it's about an $8,000 savings, but if it went up next year, wouldn't we be able to change back to a different, to our own instead of staying in the group? I mean, is not a multi-year commitment, is it?
To my knowledge, is not a multi-year commitment. Brianna may be able to address that in more detail, but
sure. Yes, Councilor Long Curtis, the
OGSRP discount is how it is referenced in the materials that you have. So SAFE is offering that 9% discount this year based on the lost history of the group for the undetermined amount of time that SAFE took a look at the group. That OGSRP discount can and will change each year. So this year it is 9%, and the savings is such. Next year it may not be 9%. It might be 3%. It might be 10%. There's no way of knowing what that discount will be from year to year. So although forfeiting it this year would, we do have that impact in writing, we would have that each year. So if we decided to opt out of it this year, we would know what that looks like. And the same as next year, what we can do on proposals, we can take a look at it next year and say, okay, OGSRP, what is the discount? They'll give it to us and provide us with 2 quotes again the next year. So we'll know exactly how much we're wagering.
Okay, so choosing the less expensive option this year is not locking us into anything, and we could switch back next year and we still have our documented loss rate, correct?
So if you were to choose to go with the CIS option, yes, you could choose out of it next year. But I think what's being proposed would be to stay out of it this year and to see how the group performs, see how the partnership between CIS and SAFE harmonizes, and allow City of the Dalles to maintain the relationship that has garnered quite a bit of savings over the last few years. I am a perpetuant of change. I think change is good, but we have a really good system right now with the systems involved that have saved City of the Dalles not only money, but save workers time and departments processes with the current systems that we have in place, with the current team we have in place with SAFE.
But my question, just yes or no, is would we not be able to come back? Are we going to lose that good rate if somehow the CIS plan goes up and we decide we'd rather be on our own again? I don't think that, I think the answer is no, but I want you to tell me.
It is to my understanding that we should be able to opt in and opt out each year.
So essentially, if we took this, I'll ask Mr. Hunter this as the director. If we opted out, or excuse me, opted into the CIS plan this year, but it went up and we opted out or into the other plan next year, I don't see what the downside is for the city except we save $8,000.
So we can opt into the group this year, opt out next year. My concern about it is because of the way CIS handles other claims, is that they're not going to be as aggressive in their return to work as SAFE is, and that will affect our premiums for the coming year. So we would have an increase in our experience rating over the year because any employee who was injured did not get back to work as quickly as they would have under SAFE.
And CIS handles that? You don't handle that as part of your job duty?
That's all a decision by the workers' comp insurer.
But we could still opt out next year if that happened.
Yes. If the negative side of it is then we stuck with a higher experience rating.
May I ask a question, Mayor Mays?
Did you want to ask a question? Yeah, Councilor Runyon had his hand up though too.
Okay, oh wait.
Go ahead, Councilor Runyon.
Although municipal insurance was not my forte, I'm just wondering, the discount that we do receive if we opt out and then try to come back, I'm just under the belief that part of that 9% is longevity with a particular insurer, and we may be starting over again is a possibility. I don't know if that's true or not, Brianna, but it's certainly something I've seen in my lifetime in the insurance business, that longevity does have some relationship to discounts that are offered.
Right. And in most cases that would be true. In this case, the workers' compensation carrier remains Safe. Safe Corporation would still be the provider. Either way we chose to go. It's just a matter of this year we get to choose to stay the course with how we've been going and forfeit a possible savings, or we have the option to go with Safe / a partnership that they have built with CIS.
Okay.
If the option is chosen, the longevity still stays with Safe. Safe is still the carrier, which is very good. I think I can speak for most people. We enjoy working with Safe. I know I do as an agent, and most people feel very well supported by Safe. In my experience in speaking with the different departments within the city.
Okay. Well, I was just actually trying to put some verification with Councilor Long Curtis's comment. If there's no loss to coming back, that discounts would be applied the same, but longevity is not part of the formula, then that's probably something we should consider.
City manager had a comment, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Brianna, some insurances, when you're put into a group or a pool, our experience factor is included with all the other participants. So can this harm our experience factor? That was my question, as far as we get lumped in with 20 or 40 other cities and they have a terrible experience. Will ours change based upon the group, the pool?
That's a really good question, Julie. So because this year's proposal includes a discount line for the OGSERP, in your packet where you receive 2 Safe proposals, if you refer to the CIS proposal, there's a line item there that's right next to your experience rating that says OGSERP discount. And that is the discount that is in question this year. So if City of the Dalles were to choose to enter into that OGSERP, it would not change your modification factor. Your City of the Dalles has their own unique modification factor, which is compiled from your 3 years loss history. The thing that can change is that OGSERP discount. If the group, meaning all of the entities that are performing and have elected to join the OGSERP, if their performance decreases, then that discount can shrink. It can go down, it can go away, but it will not act as a surcharge. So you'll never be charged more. You can just get less of a discount, but your modification factor will remain. And the hope is that if you choose the non-CIS option, that we will be able to continue to work with all of the same Safe departments and staff that we've been working with in order to continue that amazing mod factor mending that we've been on. As you will recall, over the years, working with the team that we've worked with right now with Safe, we've garnered massive discounts. Daniel did a really good job of highlighting that in the staff report. The fear from what I'm hearing is that if we go with the discounted policy and we change up that team that we've been working with and we implement a new team that we're unfamiliar with, that could affect that mod factor, because the mod factor takes many things into account, including time loss and claims costs. So if we change departments in how that's being handled, we just don't want to get off course. We're on such a good course with that mod factor. Going back from 2016 to now, each year has been such an improvement with the team implemented now. Daniel, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was it in a nutshell.
Okay.
Other things that go into the experience rating are summarized in the lead into my staff report, and they include the time loss, which is really the one concern that I'm having with going with CIS if they're not going to be as aggressive on the return to work. Each day an employee is out of work due to at work injury, that's more time loss, and that ends up affecting our experience rating and thus our premiums.
Okay, any other comments or discussion?
Yes. So the thing about insurance is the larger the risk pool, the more people involved, the more your risk goes down. And that's why it's attractive to go into the CIS group. And they have the same motivations that we do of keeping their loss low. And we all have the ability to put pressure on CIS as individual cities or counties in order to have them do their job more aggressively for us. And it doesn't make any sense to me to pay extra this year just because maybe something will happen next year, but we don't know. When next year, if something did happen, we could come right back to where we are. We still have our good rating.
Maybe not.
What do you mean, maybe not?
If we
They're going to offer two proposals next year.
If we have claims next year and we have a higher time loss due to employees not returning to work as quickly, that impacts our experience rating negatively, which increases our premium.
But that could happen to us anyway, because we could have just in our small little pool of just the Dalles, we could have workers that have an accident this year and cause our rating to go different. I mean, there's no guarantee. We're just, sometimes it's just luck, right? So if you go into a bigger pool with more cities, more counties, more employees, if one person gets hurt, it's a smaller factor than in the bigger group. You always want to be part of a bigger group to get a better rating and to have less risk. You're spreading the risk around. They're going to give us two quotes next year. If we don't have any problems at the city, if it's another city having a problem that causes CIS's pool to bump up, we're going to still get a good offer from SAFE because they know that we're good clients and that we kept it down for the number of years. It's about us and what we do, which is exactly what we're doing now, except we save $8,000.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, looking for a motion. We do have two alternatives there. One is a staff recommendation, and number two is to approve with SAFE and CIS.
I'll make a motion. I'll move to approve the city's worker compensation insurance with SAFE and CIS group in the amount of $83,231.27.
Is there a second?
Could you repeat that again? Because I think you said SAFE and CIS.
Well, it's SAFE policy, and then in the motion, the way it's written is /CIS group. So it's the SAFE policy, but in the CIS group.
It's number two on the staff report under alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll second it. As much as I like longevity and sticking with your agent forever and ever, money's money, and we still have some service involved locally, and I appreciate that. And but it makes sense.
It's been moved by Councilor Long Curtis and seconded by Councilor Runyon to approve the insurance package with SAFE and CIS for $83,231.27. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of City Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Long Curtis.
Aye.
Rod Runyon.
Aye.
McLaughlin,
Aye.
Randall,
No.
Richardson.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, we have item 12C, which is the selection of a firm for the recruitment for a new city manager. I believe City Manager Kruger, are you going to give the staff report?
Yes, it's a very brief one because I wanted you to be able to have a conversation about which direction you want to go without me unduly influencing the recruitment. We did seek quotes from 5 different Northwest companies, and only 2 provided proposals. 1 declined because they were too busy, and the other 2 didn't respond at all. So the quotes before you tonight are from Profman and Jensen Strategies, and I have included their proposals in your packet so you would have time to read them. They're fairly similar. The price is different. Profman came in with an $18,500 plus expenses, and Jensen's was $25,000 plus expenses. But if you read through the detail of their expenses, they're, a little different here and there as well. So I would just entertain that you discuss, or if someone has a motion they want to make on which one you want, that's fine too. And on whatever decision you make, I will reach out to that firm and we'll get things moving along for you.
With the exception of the price tag, Ms. Kruger, is there any, what you would call, in looking through these proposals, I know I have an opinion, but in your opinion, is there any material difference in the proposals other than the cost?
I get just my own opinion as I read through them. I felt like Profman brought a little more experience to the table and a lot more staffing options than Jensen. So I was impressed with that. And I was also impressed with the fact that their proposal spoke more to in-person meetings, where Jensen seemed more electronic meeting oriented. And I just think for this process, the council should be able to have some personal interactions with the people that are going to help them select their new city manager.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, I guess we got 3 options. Is we can pick Profman, we can pick Jensen, or we can delay a decision to give council more time to think about it until June 28th. Councilor Richardson?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious, you've had a lot of experience now in city government, and obviously Julie and other staff have. Has anybody on staff or yourself had any experience with either of these firms?
I've had experience with Profman personally, a very capable firm. I've had indirect experience with Jensen. Jensen hired my successor in Cannon Beach, and I think they did a fine job from what I've heard. I have not been very aggressive in calling them, Cannon Beach that is, to find out a little more about their services and their performance. I'd be happy to do that if anyone wants me to. But yeah, I'm familiar with both firms, especially Profman. Does that answer your question? Counselor?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I wouldn't, as Councilor Runyon, I wouldn't mind a little more time here, and I don't think 2 weeks is going to make the difference one way or the other if we were to postpone a little bit. And part of that was that the 2 different base amounts, yet the lower base amount one, it's inferred here that their expenses were higher than the one that came in with a higher amount. And so I'd like to get a little more analysis of what those expenses are. I really haven't had time to sit down and go through that, but that's just me. Others may not feel the same way.
How do the other counselors feel? Do you want to put this off as Council Runyon has suggested for 2 more weeks? I would think that if we did that, we might give the staff a little more direction as far as pursuing Council Runyon's question about the expenses, unless you already know the answer to that, Ms. Kruger?
That would be very difficult to answer because it will entirely depend upon you as the council and sitting down and deciding what you want that process to look like, what level of involvement you want from them, how many meetings you want to have with them. And I honestly, I don't think you can make those decisions till you have your first meeting with them.
Well, one thing I would like, sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
Well, I would like if we took the 2 weeks to think about it and also reach out to some of their references. Because it needs to probably come from staff. So there's just one contact. They gave some different cities and counties that they had done work for. And I would just be curious about what their impression was and, not only how satisfied are they, but, was the firm listening and working with them or with the council, or did the firm really heavy-handedly lead it, for example, just so we know what we're considering, if there's any differences between how they approach things and how satisfied people are. I mean, because you can say that you found a city manager for someone, but that doesn't tell you whether or not it actually was a good fit. And so just the fact that they did work for someone, which they've listed, that doesn't really give me enough information to know how good they are.
I'm all for getting references. I'm all for checking references. I think that's very important. But I would also suggest that be careful of the references you check, because you don't want to check with a reference that the firm had hired as city manager. For example, on page 12 of the Jensen proposal, I know 2 of those city managers are listed as references were hired by Jensen. And I would suggest that those people might have a somewhat of a conflict. So if you do check with those 2 cities, I would check with some other individual besides those 2.
Yeah, council.
Pardon me?
I would check with council, the people who are doing the hiring, who are responsible for evaluating the city manager.
Okay, so assuming that the rest of the council is okay with this direction, Ms. Kruger, do you feel you have sufficient direction to bring this back in 2 weeks?
Are you asking that I do the reference checks then? Are you comfortable with that? I'm just trying not to step on your toes because this is your process. I want to be fair.
I don't have any problem with you checking the references. Does anybody else?
I'm comfortable with waiting 2 weeks and doing reference checks, yes. And I have no problems with Julie doing that. So extend and check.
Okay. I have no problem with Julie doing that or delegating it to staff, her choice.
Thank you. So check references, do you want me to put these proposals back in your next packet, or do you just want to discuss it further and I'll just put it on the agenda with a placeholder type thing?
I would suggest you get 3 references from each firm, unless anybody else has a problem with that. And as Councilor Long Curtis suggested, making sure that that the people you check with weren't the people that were actually hired by that firm. And then bring it back to, I would document those and bring it back to the council. Is everybody okay with that approach?
Okay with that for me.
Everybody all right? Okay.
All right, then I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I may not have it in your packet when the agenda has to go out in 2 days. So I will put it on the agenda and it may just come out a bit later as I get the information.
That works for me.
Okay, is there anything else that you need from this packet? Or any other questions?
Anybody got any issues with these proposals? I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get a a couple of firms didn't even choose to respond at all.
Yeah.
Not even return a phone call. That's very disappointing. Okay, anything else? Any other business to come before the city council? With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much.